Your Grace Shymasundara and Gurudas Prabhu, to come please. I'm sure that they don't need any introduction. I'm sure that all of us know who they are. But just in case, you may have been living in an igloo somewhere for the last, 40 years of your life. These personalities are two of 6 warriors who left the shelter of their motherland, the shelter of their spiritual master, our spiritual grandfather, Srila Prabhupada, and ventured out into that great place called London, from which we're all here. And we have them to thank. For the fact that we're sitting here, we have them to thank. The fact that we're able to do any service, we have them to thank. So, we'd like to welcome them. Their Graces, Gurudas, Shymasundara Prabhu's Ki!
Well, I think that the thanks really should go the other way. And Gurudas and I are both feeling deep, very deep gratitude for all of you, to see all of you here. The little efforts we made so long ago have borne such great fruit. It's overwhelming. These devotees, know that the angels still exist and are thriving here in London. It's beyond our. We could not imagine before coming here what the level of Prabhupada's energy, how it has grown so. Right?
Yes, all glories to the assembled devotees. Prabhupada has put into place something perfect for us to continue. Actually, I think that you're very wonderful because many of you have never had any personal association with Prabhupada. I was needed to be spoon-fed by Prabhupada because I was such a baby in Krishna consciousness. He spoon-fed us books. There's nothing in place. There's just a few devotees, and Prabhupada gave us this, but many of you have never met Prabhupada, and just by reading the books, associating with other devotees, you've decided to give your life to Krishna. So to me, this is very special.
I don't know, the themes that I know over the next few days we're going to discuss the various themes of how Krishna consciousness in London started and the history of our efforts here and those kind of things. But before launching into specific events, both Gurudas and I thought it might be, because most of the people in this room are younger, and we're not around in the, let's say, the 60s when all this started, to kind of set the scene, historically speaking, what the times were like in those days. That's a good place to start. Because in order to understand Prabhupada's advent among us, it really helps to understand the historical circumstances at the time. I think the most important aspect of those days, let's talk about, let's say, the middle 60s, was that for the first time in history, a group of younger people, under 20, or 20, right around their 20s, were born into this world by the millions and millions into a peaceful time. There were no wars. There was great prosperity after the middle class. Almost every household produced children that had everything, including very high levels of education. Suddenly everyone could go to school and learn about all the philosophies and so on. And at the same time, communications were expanding at a rate that had never happened in history before. You could actually telephone around the world. You could actually get on a passenger plane and fly anywhere in the world. This is the first time in history this happened. So all of these young people began to kind of sense, or most began to sense, that the kinds of enjoyments and so on that they were provided were not really fulfilling, that they didn't really satisfy us. Many began to think that there must be something more than just this material prosperity. And in a way that became like a wave, millions and millions of young people began to gather in a few cities of the world and pursue higher things, look for higher things, experiment, explore for something more than what they were provided with in their youth by their parents. And they began to see their parents' activities as being very boring, mundane, useless, really. In the end, everyone just dies, and they didn't seem to be very happy. So one of these places, and probably the most explosive of these places, was the Lower East Side of New York City and San Francisco on the west coast of the United States. Suddenly millions, well, I won't say millions, but hundreds of thousands of young people began to gather in these places, and soon they took over the entire neighborhoods, all young people. Hundreds and thousands of young people in the streets, looking for something more. When you realize that that Prabhupada came through this little window in time, about this big, he was the only person in all the world who came in and sat down with us. All these tens of thousands of people, he came among us with the perfect answers to what we were looking for. It was an extremely fortunate event in time. You want to expand on that?
One of my favorite little adages of Prabhupada that he says is, art means full belly. We were looking at some art in the Nandagan temple, and that's what Prabhupada said. And then he said, in order for people to appreciate Krishna consciousness, they must be fed. So as Shymasundara was saying, this was a special time because many young people had material prosperity. They didn't have to work as much. They could question authority. I myself was in the civil rights movement, working with Martin Luther King, revolting against authority for the beliefs because I saw injustice in the world and I wanted to change this. I was getting beaten and put in jail many times. Therefore, my father really loved Krishna consciousness. Because I wouldn't get killed in Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada came through the small window, as Shymasundara Prabhu said, but he didn't know. He just had faith in Krishna. He didn't know anyone. Similar to like we didn't know anyone here except we had a few names. Prabhupada went to Butler, Pennsylvania, praying, what can I do? I'm here. I rely on Krishna. He already had a stroke on the ship, relying on Krishna. One of the main things of Prabhupada being such a great preacher was because he was a great listener. So he goes down in the mine in Butler, Pennsylvania, and there's a preacher there. And Prabhupada sat in the mine and listened. And the preacher was saying, you must worship God, you must worship Jesus. And the miner said, and he said, if you don't worship Jesus, you'll go to hell. And the miner said, what's hell? And he said, it's deep into the ground. It's very hot. It's very cramped. The miners thought, this is our working conditions every day. So they said that to the priest, that's not hell, this is what we work in. So the priest said, there's no newspapers in hell, because that was their one form of enjoyment. So Prabhupada thought, Krishna's all attractive, so I'm going to do this also. I'm going to make Krishna consciousness attractive to everybody by making it fun, as we were talking before. Being with Prabhupada was so much fun as he spoon-fed us. Fun, not always fun like being in the fire, but not at first. He was very kind. He always forgave us. We'd go out and buy something. He'd say, "Where's the receipt?" I'd say, "What's a receipt?" I would say, I was a hippie, you know. And so he says, "You boys, American boys, have had no training." But he always forgave us. And so there was an ultimate amount of materialism. Drugs, sex, and rock and roll was rampant. And so temporary enjoyment was prevalent. And yes, I had plenty. But when we came upon Srila Prabhupada, we saw this a higher taste.
Yes, one thing you have to remember also about those times is that the young people were becoming highly educated. We all went to college and we studied philosophy and so on. So it wasn't so easy to convince us anymore about what were higher things in life. We were questioning everything. There was all kinds of things being presented. You know, drugs. There were these new psychedelic drugs that expanded your mind and showed you there was no limits, that an ordinary reality that you had accepted since your childhood was really unreal, that there was a higher reality. These kinds of things were happening, the drugs. Philosophies were being presented from every quarter in school. So everyone was a bit confused about what is this higher thing that we're looking for. That was a constant theme among the young people when we were communicating to each other in our own little newspaper networks and so on. What's the higher thing? What's the real higher thing? And it was becoming the common question. But at least for me, as soon as I saw Prabhupada, visually saw Prabhupada, I saw someone that I'd never seen anyone so beautiful in my life. Prabhupada is so beautiful. And now we're becoming a little old. We're almost as old as Prabhupada was when he came to America. And we're getting ugly. I look in the mirror and say, wow, I'm getting ugly, man. My hair's falling out, and wrinkles in my face. But when we first saw Prabhupada, we thought, man, this is the most beautiful, physically beautiful person we'd ever seen. And I think Prabhupada just walked among us glowing with this beauty was almost enough to convince us. But then when he opened his mouth and started talking, his words were perfect. Any question that we had about our surroundings, our life, anything, our social networks, or anything that came up in our life, Prabhupada knew the answer immediately. And as soon as he gave the answer, you knew he was right. Oh, that's right. So everyone had a puzzle. The puzzle was solved very quickly just by seeing Prabhupada, that such beauty could not be ordinary, could not be manifested in an ordinary being, that he could glow and be perfect and always happy. Wow, happy. We want to be happy. That's our main goal in life. But so to see someone who's always happy, well, you better take note how he's doing it. There was no other example of this. I think in the 40 years, or what is it now, 50 years almost, since I met Prabhupada, I've never seen anyone as beautiful as Prabhupada, anywhere. This is amazing. And so at that time, we were very influenced by beauty, and everything was so groovy and beautiful, And we dressed everything up in colors. That was the age of colors. And Prabhupada was perfect for that situation. He was so gorgeous. He smelled so good. Everything. He brought us things like incense. We had never met anybody from India before. In those days, there were no Indians in America. Zero. I never met an Indian in my life till I met Prabhupada. All we knew about India was some books, things we might have read in books about, they had these yogis over there who meditated in the Himalayas, or they climbed ropes and disappeared into clouds. We'd seen pictures of tigers and palaces and things like that, but no one knew much about India yet in those days. So we met this man from India, and he seemed to be bringing, because he told us what he was doing was so ancient. Wow, right away we were intrigued. This is going back in time, thousands and tens of thousands of years, his knowledge. And he spoke this language called Sanskrit, which he told us was the original language on this whole planet, that all other languages derive from it. We could see with our intelligence, he's right. All these things are right. We just dropped everything else we were doing. I said, well, this is it. Let's just follow this guy and see where he leads us. And all the other aspects, like Gurudas was saying about humor and fun, were there. I mean, first his beauty, then his words, and then what attracted me the most, and I think many of us in those days to Prabhupada, was his sense of adventure and action. Geez, he just dropped his whole life, everything he was doing, and got on a ship and went to America as an old man with no money. Wow, we liked those kind of things. We were young and adventurous too, We read a lot. We saw a lot of television shows about this stuff. We wanted to do something active like that. Mr. Action was there, the leader of the pack, the action pack. Wow! He laid down the magic carpet and said, "Get on, let's go." This is the main thing that got attracted me, was this active spirit. And the magic. At the times, in those days, everything became magic. The lifestyle was built around the concept of magic, that you don't consciously, by cause and effect, create great things in your life. You let them happen. You do your thing. Everything is going to be magic. Events where people got together were called happenings. It was spontaneous. Everything, as long as you kept your mind free and spontaneous, great magic things would happen to you. And Prabhupada seemed to personify this attitude, this atmosphere of magic. Just being, we hadn't even met him yet. We were on his magic carpet ride, waiting for him to come. And as soon as we saw him, we took off with him. All of his disciples in those days, early days, were on this magic carpet. So these are important things to have in mind as a background for why we came to London and what we did here, and why everything we did here seemed to get fabulously big. It all happened here. We didn't come with any plan. We just relied on Prabhupada's magic.
We had one plan. We wanted to meet the Beatles.
Oh, that's
Now, back in San Francisco, we said this. Now, just think, what would you do if you're sitting in San Francisco? How would you go about this? What would you do? You rely on Krishna. Since Prabhupada was the only Indian we met, we thought India was perfect. We did not think that monkeys would come and steal your groceries. We did not think people would carry water glasses with their fingers in them. We did not think people would knock on the door and come in. We've been to India, but Prabhupada's so merciful. And it was an informed decision for me. I was studying Zen, Buddhism. I was at many meetings with Native Americans, living with Native Americans. I made a film. In my boyhood, our friends would sometimes have a game where we would send myself and a few people out with no money and see who could come back with the best adventures and maybe the most money. So I was practicing that. I usually won. And I was doing all the psychotropics. Timothy Leary gave me my first acid. Native Americans turned me on to peyote. Maria Sabina gave me my mushrooms in Mexico. So I had experienced different realms, doors of perception, and yet Prabhupada was so wonderful that he was able to attract me. And I was very happy. I was not looking for this. I had been called to the army. I fought the army. I'm not going because I was a civil rights revolutionary. I don't want to be going to any Vietnam and fighting faceless people that didn't do anything to me. And so my point is that I was not looking to surrender to a transcendental army and be disciplined. No. But Prabhupada didn't tell us about discipline. Shymasundara had a dog named Ralph, and I had a dog named Ketal, which means what's happening in Spanish. And Prabhupada just let them come at the front of the temple. We could tie them up like horses at a saloon or something. But sometimes Ketal would actually come into the temple and chant. And Prabhupada would pet Janaki's cat with his feet. So much was going on. The congregation was very eclectic, and Prabhupada was spoon-feeding us, talking about his beauty. Now we're going out to the airport. The Swami's coming, the Swami's coming. We went in our caravan of painted cars. Everybody painted cars. We had a Krishnalak, a Cadillac painted with Hare Krishna on the side. There was only one dhoti, Hayagriva's dhoti. So Shymasundara had this Afghani shepherd's costume that smelled like sheep.
You were in your wizard outfit.
No, Mukunda was the wizard. Mukunda had a paisley, Merlin the magician. And Jamuna, practicing her sewing for better uses later, made me a samurai outfit. And we went out to the airport, and everyone came out of the airplane. Where's the Swami? Where's the Swami? So he's smart. Like I do in the airplane. Let everybody the minute it stops, they stand up and wait. They can't wait to get out of this confined fuselage. The Prabhupada just sits and chants, then everybody goes, and he leisurely goes. So I learned from the example, and I do that. But where was the Swami? Where was the Swami? So everybody comes out, and then this royal figure, whose feet did not touch the ground, with his head to the skies, golden effulgence, comes into our midst and sits down and ties the kartals perfectly and starts to chant. And we're all there. And Mukunda embraced him. He didn't tell us about bowing down. He didn't tell us about Vyasa-sans in the minute. He'd sit on the altar, sit on the floor. So he comes out. Mukunda embraces him. Prabhupada embraces Mukunda. He sits down and ties his kartals, chants perfectly. We're chanting. The airport officials are saying, what's happening? We can't have this. they're coming over to get us to stop. And just before they reach us, Prabhupada stops. He says, "Oh, glorious to the assembled devotees." So the officials have nothing to do.
Gurudas has opened a lot of possibilities in that last one. Prabhupada was the Swami. He wasn't Prabhupada yet, he was the Swami. He was so lenient and tolerant with us. We were just a mob of unruly hippies with no understanding of Vaishnava etiquette or anything like that, or that there was a proper mode to any kind of worship or anything. And so Mahavishnu reminded me of this yesterday. He said, Prabhupada was the zaniest. Mahavishnu had that hat on with all the stuff on it. Prabhupada was the zaniest. Why not honor him that way? Yeah, see, Prabhupada, we were all so zany in this group, but Prabhupada was the zaniest of us all. We would walk with him down through the crowded streets of Haight-Ashbury where everyone was dressed in some costume or other, some mountain man or whatever, Red Indians and outfits of every description. And nothing would bother him at all. He'd just be walking along like this. And it wasn't until years later that I understood why he said this, but I said, Prabhupada, doesn't any of this bother you? People openly kissing on the streets and taking drugs. Oh no, he says, no, I am an old Calcutta boy. Years later we understood when we went to Calcutta why he said that. But here he was, and out of all the yogis and yogis and bogies in this world, he was the only one who came and sat down with the hippies and became one of us. And so gradually he spoon-fed us. Gurudas was talking about the dogs. I'll never forget, I drove him a lot because we had an old car with Hare Krishna written all over the side of it. And Prabhupada had never been on freeways before. He had never even really been on an well, that was his first airplane flight from New York to San Francisco. And so he asked one day if he could go out and drive on the freeway. So we got him in the car, and the passenger seat in front wouldn't sit upright. It fell back. It was an old car. So Prabhupada, who was fairly small in stature anyway, was way down like this. All you could see was the little top of his head. And we'd speed up and down these freeways at 70 miles an hour. Prabhupada would just look around, make little comments. And in the back seat was my dog. Prabhupada never said anything. He learned from us while we were learning from him. He wanted to be our guide, but he wanted to learn how our culture worked, how we did things. We hadn't been in New York with him, but in New York, we began to understand as some of the New York devotees came to San Francisco that it was kind of a strictly run ashram. There was a lot of discipline there, and it was mostly men, brahmacharis, and they did their worships and all this. And it was and guys like Brahmananda and Gargamuni were kind of militant, running the show there. But when Prabhupada came to California, he created a whole different atmosphere. We all had girlfriends. He made us get married, so we all became family men immediately. All of his closest devotees there were families. So a family atmosphere began, and a lot more tolerant. Prabhupada was very tolerant with us, and slowly spoon-fed us not to take intoxicants, not to smoke. I mean, in the beginning, we used to, after his lectures, we'd run out on the sidewalk and smoke. And our dogs would be all waiting for us out there. And gradually he just said, no, you should do this. You shouldn't do that. And as we began to accept him more and more, we stopped doing those things. He did it the perfect way. If he would have told us that in the beginning, we'd all flown away. So in that way, he became more our friend and our father, and these kind of relationships became very personal very quickly. And it's funny because we all thought that Prabhupada likes me, he really likes me, he loves me. Everyone thought that way, and later as we began to read Krishna book and so on, we saw the same things in the Krishna personality.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks that they're special to him.
Yeah.
This was a wonderful way of Prabhupada entered our hearts individually. We were all pretty much, not very special people at all. But each of us had a little talent of some kind, and Prabhupada would bring that little talent out and make it very big. So gradually this is the way it began to form in San Francisco, which is the incubus for London, the San Francisco Center. So it's kind of important to understand how the consciousness was developed in San Francisco.
So much to say. Which first? It's true. London followed San Francisco in spirit. It was open. It was searching. It wasn't afraid. The young people were questioning authority, and it actually followed the theme of San Francisco. So it was very ripe, fertile ground when we got here. But before we got here, again, back in the car, one time there was a car on a hill, and Prabhupada was in it, and the car was out of control, and still Prabhupada was just very calm. And then we righted the car, and he was just very calm. He was ready to go with Krishna at any moment. Native Americans in America, some say it's a good day to die, which means you want to use every moment wisely, because you may die at any moment. So, even with Prabhupada in our midst, at one time he said, we finally got a Vyasa-san for him, that I may die at any moment, so please carry on this movement. We didn't even have an idea of the movement. Prabhupada was spoon-feeding us, teaching us everything. He would go into the kitchen, and Harsharani would be there making pakoras, and he'd go into the kitchen and pop a pakora in his mouth. And of course, without touching his mouth. On the way to Montreal, we played the game. We had a big jar of gulab jamans for Prabhupada, and we said, let's play the game like Prabhupada, see if we can eat without touching our mouth. So we were popping gulab jamans, and by the time we got to the border, we were intoxicated, and the customs officials were wondering, what's this thing that they're carrying, a big jar of these little drug balls. But they let us in. Another time we were with Prabhupada in the car, and in India that the horn and the brakes are more important than the motor. So we're riding down the street, and the horn broke. So Prabhupada said, give me my tali. And he took his cane and he banged on the tali. And sure enough, the cows, the people gravitated to the side of the road. Prabhupada said, they will think it is a new American invention. So Prabhupada would do this. What great, for some reason I asked him, the first Back to Godhead with a color cover had a picture of Lord.Siva on it. So I would ask Prabhupada zany questions, anything. I was like a little kid, and I should have perhaps edited myself sometimes, but I said, can we wear Lord.Siva masks on Harinam? So Prabhupada said, yes. He said, and then he illustrates it with a Charles, and I'm going to use his language, Charles Chaplin, 50 years before, was at a dancing ball, and his tailing coats were, he went into the private room and he saw that his tailing coats were somewhat ripped. So he ripped his tailing coats all the way to the neck and went out and danced like anything. And then everybody saw this, and they went into the private room and danced and ripped their tailing coats up to the neck and danced. So this was Prabhupada's example that you can do something and people will follow. So yes, you can wear, Lord, you've seen the mask on Hari now.
Prabhupada was so attractive to us that our whole lives began to revolve around him completely. From the time we woke up in the morning till we slept at night, all we could think about was Prabhupada. What did he want next? What can I do? And we began to extend ourselves extremely to try to get his attention. You know, it was a competition, a transcendental competition in a way. There were 30 or 40 of us eventually. So how to be special for Prabhupada so he'll notice you? Well, you do the most extreme service you can. You try to do something as big as possible that you know he will like and catch his eye. So we were doing that kind of thing. But one of the examples of our extreme dependence on Prabhupada, and the action that came up, that we were all just living in this action film. One of the symbols or examples of that is that nobody recorded anything. There were tape recorders available in those days, but if you look back, the first 2 years of the San Francisco Yatra, there are no recordings of Prabhupada's lectures or his speeches out at when we go out in public places or anything, because we are so deeply involved with Prabhupada as a living entity, and as living entities just interacting with him constantly. We didn't even think about recording what he was saying, or that it should be for posterity. It was a happening. It was just going. It was in full throttle thrust. Just think of it. There was no recordings of any of his lectures for 2 years. We went every day, twice we listened to him, just avidly. We were just drinking in everything about him, everything he said, his beauty and his actions, so much that we didn't even think about recording anything. It's pretty astounding.
Yeah. At first, though, we didn't get to see Prabhupada very much. Hayagriva was editing, but we didn't have books yet. The Back to Godhead was mimeographed, the inexpensive type of printing. The kirtans with Prabhupada were 7 o'clock in the morning, 7 at night, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. No Mangalarti, no every day. And we sometimes could have an audience Tuesday and Thursday. And Mukunda was an intermediary. So, like Shymasundara said, first I stood on my toes so Prabhupada would see me above others. Every time I did something like that, he'd become transcendental. I mean, later on, when I tried to register the society in Mumbai, there were some glitches, and Prabhupada gave me the silent treatment for 3 days. and I would stand behind the wall, and Prabhupada would be coming, and I'd come out like this, and he'd still not see me. So standing on the toes didn't work in San Francisco. So, like Shymasundara said, Mukunda was doing something, so I should do something. Meanwhile, Prabhupada called me in. A private audience, my first private audience. He wanted to know about cameras, because I was recording with photographs, but not audio. So I was the photographer, and Prabhupada said, there's somebody in India who wants a camera, Pentax, is it good? And I said, yes. And he saw I had a Nikon. So I showed it to him, and there was a little light meter on it, where it has a photosensitive cell, and if you put your hand or something over the light, the cells, the needle will go like that, and then you take it off, and the needle will show the light. So Prabhupada played with that light meter. for 20 minutes. I sat there, when is this game going to end? But I was so happy. I was so happy to be in his presence. But Prabhupada would do that. Everything he did was now and perfect. He used to play this game with little baby Kishori. She would run to his, not his Vyasa-san, his desk seat, and laugh, and he would tussle her here, and then run away, and then run again, and he would tussle her here, and they'd laugh, and this lasted for about 20 minutes too, and she was like a golden retriever dog, fetching a ball. She didn't get tired of it, and Prabhupada didn't get tired of it, and finally they realized, we're tired, so we'll do something else. So Prabhupada was perfect, and so then I started to get all these camera catalogs, because I said, now I have my foot in the door like a salesman, and I can go. I mean, I just love being with him, because even from the first time he did this oceanic smile, like I was the most special person in the world. You've come, Gurudas. And then I come 20 minutes later, the same thing, like we hadn't seen each other for 10 years. He'd make you feel so good. So I said, oh yeah, I'm going to study the Swami. So I go in anything. I bring photo catalogs. Any excuse. Now, his servants at the time didn't like that I was so there all the time. So they said, don't let Gurudas in. But see, now here's a proof of how Lord Krishna is in your heart. And Radha Krishna does guide things. Because when I would go to see Prabhupada with some catalog or some excuse, at that time they would go to the kitchen and they wouldn't be there, and they'd come back, oh, Gurudas is there again. So reunited, and it feels so good. I want to thank Radha Londonishvaras, because their munificent mercy is so nice. I gaze on the face of Radharani, and I see that she is seen right inside my heart, and she is laughing at and forgiving my foibles, and honoring anything I do that's nice, but such a special face. And then Londonishvara, so merciful. You know, Prabhupada said to me one time, if you do something and I do not forgive you, Krishna will forgive you. But if Krishna doesn't forgive you, Radharani will.
And thinking of those first special times with Prabhupada, to inaugurate Prabhupada's arrival in San Francisco, several of us had friends among the emerging rock and roll community. So we thought to put on a big dance to earn money for Prabhupada. There was no money. We had no money. Nobody worked. He was a taxi driver. None of us worked. So after the dance was quite spectacular, as you might have read. But the next day, Mukunda came to me and said, Swamiji wants to see you. I said, me? Really? Oh my goodness. I was scared to death. Okay. I went up there and went in his room, and of course we didn't know about bowing down or anything like that. We didn't wear dhotis or anything. So I just kind of stood there and shuffled, and when I saw him sitting on his pad there, he said, come, sit with me. So I came over, and his pad was like for me to go. So I sat about this far from him on his pad. He said, no, you sit closer. So I screwed it a little bit more, and then he said, no, here, close. Until I was touching him. Oh my God, I was scared to death. But a feeling came over me that I've only experienced a few times in my life, of just total peace, and where your whole body tingles with delight. Just feeling his silk dhoti, the sleeve of it, brushing my arm. And he said, so, you have raised how much money last night? I said, I think about a little over $2,000. I'm not sure, I didn't collect the money. He says, oh? He says, well, but you are responsible for this money. And I said, well, a lot of us worked on it. No, he said, you are the one responsible. And he said, do you know bookkeeping? And I said, no, I don't really know bookkeeping. He said, well, Mukunda, bring paper. So Mukunda brought over a sheet of paper and a pen, and he says, now I will teach you bookkeeping. He said, you come every morning, and I will teach you bookkeeping. So that was my first intimate meeting with Prabhupada. So I took that to the extreme. I played so stupid. Maybe I was just stupid. I'd come in the morning and there would be that book laid out there with so much income and so much outgo. And he would say, there, you are 47 cents off. I would go, oh my God. You know? And he'd say, where is the receipt? There's no receipt product. You must always get receipt. First, he just started on a practical level teaching us how to exist. We didn't even know how to live yet. He taught us everything. He micromanaged our lives. He would in one day, he would tell you how to doctor your cold, how to make your food, how you should sleep, how you should think. Every aspect of life, Prabhupada gradually taught us, even down to the minute aspect. I was sort of like Gurudas. I wanted to use every excuse to get in to see him. So I was very happy when he finally told me that he gave me a big assignment. He said, to carving the Jagannath's deities. Can you carve this? And he drew me a little diagram of how I should carve, the size he wanted, the Jagannaths and so on. So I began doing that. And every day he would ask me how it was coming. So I began to realize that the slower I did this project, the more I could see Prabhupada. And the longer he would stay in San Francisco, because he wasn't going to leave until those deities were finished. I dragged my heels, Well, Prabhupada, I had a few problems yesterday. There were some cracks in the wood, and I put the putty in there, and it's drying. It'll be a couple more days before I can.
You did it in London too.
So finally one day, I lived about 6 or 8 blocks down Haight Street, 6 or 8 blocks from the temple, long blocks. Finally one day I heard a tapping on my door. I was carving the Jagannath in my apartment, out on the kind of a little balcony on the roof. And I heard a knocking on the door. I opened the door, and there's Prabhupada standing there with his cane. I've come to see your progress. So he came in, and the Jagannath was laying on his back on the floor. I was painting him. It was in the final things of painting him. And I was still smoking. He had not really made it clear that we shouldn't smoke. So there was a pack of cigarettes sitting on Lord Jagannath's head. Prabhupada said, what is that? I said, well, those are cigarettes, Prabhupada. He said, what? He took his hand and hit that pack of cigarettes and threw it across the room. No more cigarettes. That was it. But in that way, we vied for his attention, and he gave us his attention. It was full. Imagine he walked, 70-year-old man walking that distance just to check on things. Well, I suppose part of setting the scene for London, I went back last night through some of the old letters that Prabhupada wrote us back in those days. And the earliest mention that I could find about London was in a letter to Mukunda from Prabhupada dated the 6th of May, 1968. And it's a long letter, but near the end he says, Shymasundara wanted to go to London. What is his opinion about this? I am very much eager to open a center in London. If Shymasundara and Malati go there, then one or two other brahmacharis may go there. To organize a center in London. And as soon as it is in make-up, then I may go there for some time to deal with the Beatles, who are so much anxious to understand about spiritual knowledge. Any sincere person, never mind whether he is hippie or Beatle, if he is actually searching for something beyond this hackneyed material sense gratification, surely he will find the most comfortable shelter under the lotus feet of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is non-different from Lord Krishna. We should try our best, begging every person to give us some time to listen about this Krishna consciousness movement as it is taught by Lord Chaitanya. Now, this is the earliest allusion to London that I could find in his letters. And there was the next one was on 7th of June 1968 to me. I had just gotten out of jail. There were no letters for about 2 months to me there. My dear Shymasundara, I'm so glad to receive your letter dated May 30th, 1968. Blah, blah, blah. I think it is Krishna's desire and blessings, as a sannyasin, I should not fix up at a certain place and take your service comfortably. It is not the desire of Krishna. He wants me traveling throughout the whole western part of the world, and therefore I think it is Krishna's desire that now I shall shift my activities, at least for some time, in the European countries. So it is almost certain that I'm going to London by the month of August. Now this reminded me, last night seeing these letters reminded us that Prabhupada had already decided to go to London, even if it was alone. He wanted to go there in August of 1968 because he was having visa difficulties in the United States. And so Prabhupada was ready to come here in August of 68, whether anybody else was here or not. And in fact, even though we came in August of 68, he didn't come until August of 69, which is another story we'll get into later, why that was delayed. So it is almost certain that I'm going to London by the month of August. And if you all wish to come there, then you can prepare for the trip. So far I remember that you know the German language as well as Dutch language, so after we have started our London branch, you shall have to go to Germany. And I think Hansaduda can help you there because he also knows some broken German. The whole idea is that if we can organize a nice kirtan party, which Mukunda can do, because he is a music master, and if we travel in the European countries with this kirtan party, supported by our books and literature, I'm sure it will be a great successful missionary work. I know both you and your wife are very sincere servitors of the Lord, and if Malati delivers her baby during the Ratha Yatra festival, then she can take 1 month's rest in July and may be able to accompany you with your newly born Krishna consciousness baby. For the time being, finish your work in the hands, and side by side try to chalk out a program how we shall propagate Krishna consciousness in the European countries. And then on the same day, a letter to Gurudas and another letter to Jamuna. Gurudas's letter, it says, our London program is gradually becoming a tangible fact, and I am receiving letters from California devotees which are very encouraging. I think I shall be starting for London in the month of August. Certainly your conclusion is very nice, we should always depend on Krishna. But for service, we can make our plan, and Krishna will help us. And then to Jamuna he says, I am sure if you and your husband, Mukunda and Janaki, and Shymasundara and Malati join, certainly the London program will be a grand success. I have already written about this to your husband, and you can know from him about this program. That's the earliest mention of Prabhupada about London. As I recall, we had been hashing around during the months of maybe May and August, April and May of 1968, because we'd been there already 2 years in San Francisco, and we were getting some itchy feet, and other devotees were going out and starting new temples in Los Angeles, Santa Fe, Montreal, and Seattle, and we were kind of thinking we would like to get out and start a new temple too, that our work was done. The groundwork had been laid in San Francisco. It was a booming success. We were getting a little bored. And also the Haight-Ashbury district where we lived was becoming unraveled. It was becoming more and more increasingly violent, and the beautiful spirit of hippiedom that had started there, the summer of love, was disappearing. It was becoming full of drugs and bad people. And the scene, the hippie scene, or the international young people scene, was shifting to London. The Beatles and the Rolling Stones, other rock and roll, was shifting the world's attention toward London. So all of these things came together at the right time. You can see a little bit some of the background that went into preparation for London. One thing that happened was when I got out of jail, suddenly in the mail one day I received a check from the government for almost $2,000. This was money that was in my pocket when the police busted me. This was before I met Prabhupada. I went to jail years after I met Prabhupada. So we thought, well, this is the financing. This is Krishna's arrangement. This is the magic that will give us some money to go out and try to start a temple in London. And it was an idea that grew over several weeks and months' time. And Prabhupada heard about us. We were thinking about going to London before Prabhupada even heard about it. And then when he heard about it, then he gave us all encouragement to do it. This would have been in June of '68. We arrived in August of that year. We'll get into those stories later. Anything?
Well, yes, I was also wanting to go to London. We did with him. There was a letter where Prabhupada left Jamuna and my name out, and I went to him and said, are we not going to London now? He said, no, you're going. So I was very happy we were ready.
You were thinking of going to India before, and then...
Well,
yeah.
I wanted to go to Vrindavan. I read Paramahansa Yogananda's autobiography of a yogi, and the chapter that stood out was the test of faith, where his brothers said, go to Vrindavan with no money and see how fast you can get back, and the stories. And Paramahansa Yogananda went to Vrindavan, and immediately the Brijvasis fed him, hosted him, gave him a ticket to go back, and his faith was restored. So for some reason I asked Prabhupada, can I go to Vrindavan? In 1966 or 7 I asked, and Prabhupada remembered that. So I did want to go, but I wanted to go to London first. And there is this rasa that Shymasundara had with his being the builder of things. And like when Prabhupada came for the Jagannath deities, later on in London, Shymasundara's building downstairs in Bury Place, and Prabhupada has his rooms now upstairs. So Shymasundara says, Prabhupada, would you like me to stop hammering? Is it disturbing you? And Prabhupada said, no, when I hear you hammering, I know you're working. The point is, you never know what Prabhupada's going to do. It's like a great musician. You can't predict the next riff. It's like, it's always exciting. For instance, counting. Later on in Vrindavan, Prabhupada said, how much does each inmate eat per day? Calls us inmates. So I said, we're spending about 5.5 rupees per person But we're drinking cow's milk out of that. So Prabhupada calls Anand Prabhu in, who is the greatest Vaishnava cook. Followed us from Vishakhapatnam. The God Yamat always wanted him to come and cook. Great cook. I followed Anand in the jungle, and he was up. Where's Anand? He's up in a tree picking olives and shag. He made actual shag from the jungle grasses of Vrindavan. Great cook. So he calls Anand Prabhu in and says, Can you cook everything for 4 rupees a day? So Anand says, yes. He wasn't an administrator, he was the cook. So Prabhupada says to me, Anand Prabhu says we can cook for 4 rupees a day for everyone. And I said, well, Prabhupada, I don't know. Prabhupada takes out a piece of paper, he says, okay, each inmate eats 1/4 kilo of rice. And that costs 25 anna. So I said, with due respect, Prabhupada, those are 1939 prices. And we're drinking cow's milk.
Instead of buffalo milk.
Instead of buffalo milk. Yes. I caught somebody with a turban that had a tube of water in it, and when you weren't looking, they would water down the buffalo milk and put newspaper on the top to make it look like it was skim. So yeah, we were drinking cow's milk. And he says, do it anyway. Do it anyway. I forgot the Harsharani story. Prabhupada pops into the kitchen. He eats a pakora, and Harsharani says, you can't eat in the kitchen. You can't eat while you're cooking for... It wasn't really deities then, but you can't eat while you're preparing food for Krishna. And Prabhupada said, I gave you the rules, I can break them. So he's eating pakoras. So she says, how many can you eat? And like a little boy puffed out his chest, he said, more than you can make. So all these happy times are going on in San Francisco, and we're like a family. He's our father. He's teaching us everything. Everything. He's teaching us how to cook. And suddenly he had another stroke. And so we moved to Stinson Beach, a more peaceful area, and we prayed very, very hard in the temple. Very, very hard. And then he went to Vrindavan. But then he returned, restored. And the London plans were still very important to him, because it wasn't just whim. It was to fulfill the prophecy, the wish of his Guru Maharaj, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. We did not know the spiritual potency and importance behind this. We were just saying, okay, we're going to go on the Krishna adventure.
Yeah, that's right. And part of that adventure, of course, as you pointed out so many times already, was the humor that was always constantly revolving around Prabhupada, the fun, the lightness of it. Even the episode where he got the stroke and had to go into leave us and all, we could understand that this was not really going to happen. Nothing was going to happen. That this Prabhupada was just doing this to teach us love and separation. I personally, and I don't remember anyone ever really feeling Prabhupada was going to leave us for good. We knew he was coming back. We just relished that period of him being away from us in a new way. That the humor and the fun that he propagated among us carried on. No one was in despondency. And so when he did come back, the jokes began again. And everything Prabhupada did was in a joking mood with us. I mean, of course, he was very grave. I mean, he displayed in full, exhibited all the qualities of a self-realized soul. He was grave when grave was necessary. But with our group, and he always used the principle of time, place, and circumstance. You can always point to something that Prabhupada said or did that seems contradictory to something else he said or did, if you don't plug in time, place, and circumstance. So in our place, in our time, in our circumstance in San Francisco, we needed the jolliness of Prabhupada. So he was jolly. With his disciples in New York, he was perhaps more grave, because they needed that kind of discipline in New York City. In other places, he was different, always different. This was another one of his qualities. It was like you just said, never predictable. You could never say what Prabhupada was going to do next. So many years we would knock on his door, especially when I was his secretary for a couple of years. Every day I would go many times to his door, and each time I had held a knob in my hand waiting to go in, I realized I didn't know what was going to happen the second I opened that door. But whatever it was going to be wonderful. And he would always say or do something completely surprising. Well, we never met anyone like this. And we've never met anyone like it since. Last year in Mumbai, I ran into our old godbrother Pradyumna Das. Pradyumna was part of the earliest wave of disciples in New York City back from the 65 or 6. And he's gone on in his life to become he traveled a lot with Prabhupada, a lot, because he was his Sanskrit editor. I mean, probably traveled with Prabhupada more than anyone else. And he's gone on in his life to work, to take a full-time job for 30-some years now for the United Nations in charge of their interfaith program, where he goes all around the world for the United Nations and meets all the gurus and swamis and priests and lamas and puts on interfaith programs for the United Nations. And I asked him, I said, Pradyumna, you've met every guru in the world now. Have you ever met anyone like Prabhupada out there?